Ichigo Kurosaki has been having a hard time lately, and that's putting it lightly. After going through hell and back to rescue Rukia, he was trashed by Aizen, kicked around by Yami, and then absolutely pummeled by Grimmjow. And throughout all of this, he has been being overwhelmed by an internal battle too, the one with his inner hollow, and he hasn't been winning that fight either. With how powerful the Arancars, the Espada, and of course Aizen seem to be, I should have known that Ichigo is going to need to find a way to get stronger because even his Bankai isn't enough. So of course he would be getting some kind of training arc around the corner, and that's exactly what we've got. But Kubo finds some good ways to keep it fresh and make it interesting. Because what Ichigo goes through in these chapters feels less like training and more like an intervention. He needs to get some of his power under control, specifically the kind that comes from the inner hollow. Otherwise, he's putting everyone he loves at risk. The fact that he's willing to go ask strangers for help says a lot about his current headspace. He doesn't know the Visored, and he flat out turned them down when they tried to recruit him. In fact, he turned them down multiple times, and even when he goes to them for help, it's not to join them, no. He doesn't want to accept their offer or be part of them. He just wants to understand how to control the inner hollow because they are the only people he knows of that know how to do it. The only people that might have gone through the same thing that he's been going through. It's like going to an AA meeting to find people that understand, and whether you're strangers or not, you've faced a similar struggle. You can understand each other on a base level. I love that about this. I love that he's willing to go to them for help and that it's this responsible, mature choice by Ichigo that lets us really get a better look at this group. So far, the Visored member that we've seen the most of is Shinji. He was the first, the one that tried to wrangle in Ichigo to the Visored, and the one that introduced us to the notion that there are even more Soul Reapers that have developed Hollow Man. Shinji was the one to herald in this part of this universe, and he remains kind of the focal point for the group when we meet the rest of them. The only other one that we had seen before was Hiyori, and we only met her briefly chapters ago, just enough to get a few more hints of what the dynamics of the Visors would be. And in these chapters, she's really shown to be a cool character in her own right, with how she handles and deals with things. She's tough, no nonsense, and doesn't pull any punches for anyone, even her own teammates. Which makes it scarier in the moment when we do see her first get rattled. And when we do meet the rest of the Visored, I was immediately struck by their design aesthetic. Unlike some of the other groups that we've met, like the Soul Reapers and the Arancars, there isn't really a visual thread that ties the Visored all together. You've got a schoolgirl, a street fighter, Alucard from Castlevania, this chill guy, this big Zen guy with a pink mustache, and a member of Germa 66. They couldn't look less like a cohesive unit. It seems more like a collection of people rather than a team, and maybe that's exactly what they are. People that share a common challenge, coming together from all walks of life to help each other survive their shared ordeal. I don't know, but I love how different this group feels from what we've seen so far with other groups. And from what we know, they all used to be full-fledged Soul Reapers before they gained Hollow powers and became Visored, so I'm so curious to learn more about that backstory and how they became what we see now. In some ways, they remind me of Urahara and Yoriichi, more people that used to be part of Soul Society but aren't anymore. We've actually been getting a lot of that lately. The Visored don't really have the same gravitas of being displaced Soul Reapers, so maybe they weren't as accomplished as people like Urahara and Yoriichi were. Like maybe the Visored weren't that strong at the time, but gaining mass changed all of that? I don't know. I'm mostly basing this theory on just vibes. For all I know, these folks were captains back in the day. The part that really caught my attention, though, was when Shinji revealed how much the Visored already know. They know all about Ichigo, including his progress in mastering his sword's power, but the crazier part was how much they knew about Aizen and the Hogyaku, and apparently had known all of this for years. They don't elaborate on what exactly they knew, but it seems like they knew Aizen was plotting against the Soul Society all of that time. For them to know that, I can see a couple different potential scenarios. Maybe they discovered Aizen's plans, but he used some of his hypnosis to make them seem like traitors, but I have another thought because of who these people are. They are Soul Reapers who've gained Hollow powers, and Aizen knew all about holification and all of that. Maybe these people gained their masks with Aizen's help, while he was researching the Hogyaku, or maybe even Urahara who was involved since he was the one that made the Hogyaku to begin with. There's definitely more to that story, but Shinji doesn't go further into it yet, but I can't wait to find out more. So Ichigo goes to the Visored for help to get them to help him control his inner hollow, and he's willing to get them to teach him by force if he has to. They want him to unleash that inner hollow, but he refuses. He wants to figure it out without having to let that power out. It's a noble effort, but it's clear that this is something that will require the hollow power to come out. He needs to really go through it again in order to overcome it. Even still, I like that he was initially trying to resist and learn how to control his power from just observing, but that was very clearly not enough. I love the immediate difference in his power once the mask started to form, and how quickly the Visor took his threat seriously. And there was a real built-in tension with them having to keep him contained, and a timetable that made everything feel even more dire. A ticking clock always helps with tension. If Ichigo couldn't take control of his own body in time, the Visored would have no choice but to kill him. I also love the idea of the Visored having to take shifts against him. It was like watching people step into a cage with a lion or some other dangerous beast, and that was exactly what Ichigo was. And while this was all going on in the real world, Ichigo was fighting for control in his own mind, and that was when we got into some really interesting things in these chapters. Once again, we met Ichigo's inner hollow, the all-white doppelganger that we've seen a few times, and who's been haunting Ichigo as the mask has gained more control over his body. Showing how much the inner hollow has taken hold of Ichigo's mind, we see no sign of Zangetsu anywhere in his mindscape, and get a pretty massive revelation about the inner hollow's identity, that he's also Zangetsu. The white Ichigo and the spirit of the sword that we've seen are actually one and the same, both aspects and personifications of Ichigo's spiritual energy. I love this. I love that this isn't some just invasive interloper and is instead a part of Ichigo. However this started, whether Ichigo was born with this inner hollow, whether he was given this aspect of himself during that encroachment in the pit, or something else, this is now apparently just a part of Ichigo that he has to learn to coexist with, to be able to control, and to maintain a balance within himself. There's very much a yin and yang vibe happening between Ichigo and his inner hollow, and I particularly loved how striking their confrontation was in the black and white manga panels. It was a real highlight of these chapters for me from just a visual standpoint. And then there's a phenomenal monologue from the inner hollow about the difference between kings and horses. It perfectly sums up who this character is, and how he perceived Ichigo and their current situation. There's the king that leads and the horse that follows his commands, and the inner hollow doesn't view Ichigo as the rightful king of his own mind and body, because he refuses to follow a king who he is more powerful than. He talks about their particular situation, how they are mostly equals, which Kubo has kept stressing to us visually too, but the major difference is that Ichigo lacks instinct. This whole speech was a perfect way of getting down to the heart of the internal struggle, to sum up what Ichigo needs to do to overcome this part of himself. When Ichigo's sword is shattered and he's stabbed by the inner hollow, he's shown my boy Kenpachi, who's a perfect example of the killer instinct, of the enjoyment of violence. I also loved how he kept cutting back to what was actually happening in reality as the Visor tried desperately to hold off Ichigo as he transformed into more and more of a hollow. The more that the white Ichigo was winning inside of his mind, the more he was becoming monstrous on the outside. It was really cool to see like a fully formed hollow if Ichigo ever did turn. Like it was just fun to see what that might even look like. I do think what's going on with Ichigo as far as this instinct that he supposedly lacks goes actually even deeper than just the killer instinct. I think it has more to do with the fact that this hollow part of him is a part of himself that he hasn't embraced and that he hasn't accepted, and he does kind of have to acknowledge that the instincts of that part of him, the hollow instincts of survival, which, you know, hollows do everything they can to survive. They devour other souls, they devour their own. He needs to accept that that's part of him now too, or maybe it always has been. And if he's going to be able to control it, he needs to embrace that. So I think that's the instinct really that he needs to fully accept, and that's kind of where this goes into, where he has to defeat his hollow self by kind of reintegrating it into himself. In order for him to be the king and his inner hollow to be the horse, he needs to stop treating it like it's an enemy and treat it like it's a tool that he can use and that could help bring him to new places. It's only when Ichigo accepts some of that instinct, some of that drive, and some of that part of himself that he turns the tables on his inner hollow and takes back control. I absolutely loved how each of their respective dominant colors kept spreading to different things like the sword, or especially how the Inner Hollow's robes turned black, showing perfectly how the real Ichigo was regaining the authority of his power and his body until the Hollow was forced away. But he warned Ichigo that he would keep trying to take full possession of the body. The moment that Ichigo shows any weakness, he's gonna try to take control again, which leaves us readers with a good threat to know is constantly lingering inside of Ichigo. Ichigo manages to break free from the near complete possession of the Hollow, bursting from within, now with his mask fully formed and under his control. These chapters really highlighted Kubo's talent as a storyteller. They were intimate, in-depth looks at what Ichigo is going through psychologically, while also introducing a whole new batch of characters that served that plot. And Kubo managed to capture all of this with interesting visuals that told us just as much as the dialogue, if not more. It really is great to see a main character be put through the ringer like Ichigo has been, so we get to see him confront his own issues on a very personal level, making him overcoming his inner demons so satisfying to read. He is not the horse letting someone else command him or pull on his reins. He is the king of his own self, refusing to let anything else dictate his decisions. And now that he's gone through this, he's one step closer to being strong enough to face what's coming. And apparently we're about to find out what Aizen really wants in all of this. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe. And I've got a lot more Bleach content on the way, including more entries in my first time reading Bleach, my review of the second Bleach movie, and my wife continuing to guess who characters are based on appearance alone. And if we get to 3,000 subscribers, we're going to do our first live stream. So hope you all have a great day. Take care.